Mom, when no one is looking, can you check my back? That sentence is the reason my marriage ended. My family disappeared, and my understanding of the word trust died forever. My name is Evelyn Moore. I am 47 years old. And the problem I faced, the one that unfolded quietly while everyone else watched and chose to laugh, was that my husband, Richard Moore, the father of my child, had learned how to hurt us both in ways that left no visible bruises on him. It happened at my mother-in-law's house, during one of those dinners meant to remind me of my place. Dorothy Moore's dining room was immaculate, as always. A long walnut table, polished until it reflected the chandelier like a mirror. Fine china brought out not for warmth, but for judgment. In that house, nothing existed without being evaluated. Especially me. Richard sat across from me, relaxed, confident, perfectly at ease in the role everyone expected him to play. Successful husband, devoted father, the kind of man people described as solid. He was already halfway through his second glass of wine, smiling as he spoke. "So Evelyn's still working from home," he said casually, carving into his chicken, which really just means she has more time to overthink everything. There was a ripple of polite laughter around the table. I kept my eyes on my plate. "I keep telling her," he continued, not looking at me, "kids don't need hovering. Especially not from mothers who see danger everywhere. It just makes them weak." Dorothy smiled into her napkin. My brother-in-law nodded as if this were wisdom, not cruelty. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the one that came whenever my role as Hannah's mother was reduced to a flaw. I opened my mouth once, then closed it. I had learned the cost of defending myself in that house. Silence was cheaper. Hannah sat beside me, small and careful, her back straight the way her grandmother demanded. She didn't look up. She never did when Richard spoke like that. "She's sensitive," Richard added. "Just like her mother. Runs in the family." More laughter, this time louder. Dorothy leaned forward. "Well, some women just aren't cut out for structure," she said lightly. "Children need discipline, not feelings." I nodded once, because not nodding would have made things worse. Richard reached across the table to pass a serving dish, and as he did, his elbow struck my plate. Not hard, not accidental either. The chicken slid, then fell, landing squarely on the tablecloth in front of me. Sauce splattered like a stain no napkin could hide. The room went quiet for half a second. "Oh dear," Richard said, smiling. "You really should be more careful." My face burned. I reached for my napkin, but he raised a hand. No, he said, amused. "Don't waste food. My mother raised us better than that." Dorothy's lips twitched. Richard nudged the fallen piece toward me with his fork. "Go on, pick it up." I looked at him. Just for a moment. His eyes were calm, expectant, certain I would obey. The humiliation settled over me like a weight. I was aware of everyone watching the way their gazes lingered, curious, entertained. This was not concern. This was permission. I bent forward, picked up the food with my fingers, and placed it back on my plate. "Eat it," Richard said quietly. I did. The laughter that followed was soft, indulgent. The sound people make when they've witnessed something degrading and decided it doesn't count. I swallowed. The food tasted like nothing. My hands trembled beneath the table. That was when Hannah touched me. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't clumsy. Her small hand pressed something into mine with precision, hidden by the drape of the tablecloth. She didn't look at me. She didn't change her expression. She lifted her fork and continued eating, as if nothing had happened. I felt the paper before I unfolded it. My heart began to race. I opened it slowly, keeping my face neutral, my breathing steady. "Mom, when no one is looking, can you check my back?" For a moment, the room disappeared. The voices blurred into a distant hum beneath the pounding in my ears. I read the sentence again, and again. This was not a child asking for comfort. This was a child asking for strategy. There was more written beneath it: "Don't react. They're watching, but I already understood." My daughter had learned how to survive by managing the adults around her, including me. I slipped the note into my lap and forced myself to keep eating, to nod when Richard spoke again, to smile faintly when Dorothy refilled my glass without asking. Years of marriage had trained me well. I knew how to endure, but something inside me had cracked open. Hannah asked to use the bathroom a few minutes later. Her voice was polite, controlled. Dorothy waved her hand dismissively. "Don't take too long." I'll go with her, I said, standing. She's old enough, Dorothy replied sharply. I need to wash my hands, I said, already moving. Richard watched me closely. His smile didn't fade. The bathroom door closed behind us. I locked it. Hannah leaned against the sink, her shoulders dropping as if she had been holding herself upright by sheer will. She didn't cry. She waited. I knelt in front of her. I'm going to check your back now, I said softly. Is that okay? She nodded once. What I saw changed everything I believed about my life. I will not catalog my daughter's injuries. I refuse to turn her pain into detail for consumption. What matters is this. The marks on her back were deliberate, repeated, old and new layered together like a record of time no child should carry. My vision blurred. My body screamed to react, to storm back into that dining room, to expose every lie, to tear the performance apart with my bare hands. But my daughter had asked me not to react. So I didn't. I held her. I told her I believed her. I told her she was brave. I promised her without yet knowing how that she would be safe. When we returned to the table, no one noticed anything different. Plates were cleared, dessert was served, conversation resumed, and the man who had humiliated me and hurt my child smiled across the table, confident in his control. He didn't know that the moment Hannah slipped that note into my hand, his power over us had already begun to die. He just didn't know it yet. If this story moved you, hit like and tell us where you're watching from. Someone nearby might be watching too. There are things people say about good men that make them untouchable. He provides. He's respected. He never raises his voice. He loves his family. Richard Moore checked every box. On paper, he was the ideal husband and father, an executive with a strong handshake, a volunteer at the church food drive, a man who sent flowers to my mother on her birthday without me reminding him. After what I saw on Hannah's back, I began cataloging those moments the way a detective might revisit evidence at a crime scene, each gesture, each word, re-examined under a new, terrible light. The next morning, I woke early and packed Hannah's lunch as if it were any other day. Turkey sandwich, no crust, apple slices, one of those granola bars she likes. I wrote a note on the napkin like always, "Be brave today. I love you." My hands shook as I folded the paper, even though she wouldn't see the message until lunch. Richard came downstairs whistling, adjusting his cufflinks, dressed in a navy suit tailored to suggest modesty without sacrifice. He kissed my cheek like he always did, and it took everything in me not to flinch. He poured himself coffee, sat at the kitchen island, and asked, "You okay? You look a little pale." "I didn't sleep well." "Yeah, you were tossing and turning. Nightmares?" I looked at him. This man who tucked our daughter in at night, who read her Bible stories, who installed safety locks on every window in the house. "Something like that," I said. He sipped his coffee. "Well, get some rest today. Maybe cut back on the true crime shows, huh?" I smiled. Barely. He kissed my forehead and left. After he was gone, I walked into Hannah's room. She was still in bed, her eyes open but blank. I sat beside her and didn't say anything at first, just placed my hand gently over hers. She didn't pull away. "Do you want to stay home today?" I asked. She shook her head. "He'll get mad." My throat tightened. "He's not going to hurt you again," I said, the words so soft they barely felt like sound. She didn't answer. "I saw what he did," I whispered. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." She looked at me then. Her eyes were not crying. They were beyond crying. He said, "If I tell, people will think I'm bad." I kissed her forehead, gently, carefully. "You are the bravest person I know." I let her go to school, even though it nearly broke me. But I needed time. I needed to think, and more than anything, I needed proof. Because in this town, people didn't believe what they couldn't see. And Richard had built a wall of image so pristine, no one would question him without evidence. So I started collecting. It began in subtle ways. I noted the days Hannah winced when putting on her backpack. I logged every comment Richard made about discipline and respect. I watched how Dorothy observed Hannah not with affection, but with scrutiny, as if monitoring her for cracks in performance. I went through old photos on my laptop. Birthdays, vacations, smiles that now looked forced, poses that revealed how Hannah always leaned away from her father, even when hugging him. I found one from last Christmas, Richard's arm around her shoulders, his fingers pressing into her skin, her smile frozen and strange. I enlarged the photo and stared at her eyes. Fear. It had been there the whole time. Later that week, Richard invited his coworkers over for drinks. He always enjoyed putting our family on display like a product he was proud of. Dorothy came early to help me set up, which meant criticizing everything from my tablecloth to the appetizers I chose. "Boys' club night, huh?" she said, rolling her eyes. "You better keep Hannah out of the way. Too much noise annoys men." I didn't answer. When the guests arrived, Richard did what he always did, bragged about his daughter's grades, my homemade dip that was clearly store-bought, and how he managed to keep everything in his house running smoothly. "Evelyn makes it easy," he said with a grin. "She's good at not getting in the way." The men laughed. Dorothy raised her glass. Hannah had come down to say goodnight. She stood beside me quietly, waiting. When I leaned in to kiss her head, she clutched my arm tight. Desperate, I smiled at the guests and whispered, "Go to your room. I'll be up soon." She ran upstairs. After the party, I crept into her room. She hadn't turned on the light. She was curled under the covers, trembling. "Is it safe to talk?" she asked. "Yes, baby, it's safe. I don't like when he has people over." "Why?" "He drinks more. Then he comes upstairs." My hands balled into fists. That night, I slept in her room, curled on the floor beside her bed like a guard dog. I didn't sleep. I listened for footsteps. I kept my phone in my hand. I knew now what I was up against. Not just Richard, but the lie of the perfect father, a lie everyone else had bought into so deeply they'd defend it before they ever defended a child. But I had seen enough. And I was not going to unsee it. The next morning, I made a second appointment with Hannah's pediatrician, and I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Linda Harris, an old friend, now a school counselor. She'd been through her own storm once, years ago. She would believe me. As I hung up the phone, I glanced out the window. Richard's car was pulling into the driveway. It was time to stop playing quiet. Hannah's pediatrician's office was painted in cheerful pastels, cartoon animals on the walls, a fake fish tank bubbling in the corner, a basket of books that smelled like Lysol. It was the kind of place built to put children at ease. But there was nothing comforting about what I was doing there. "I just want her to get checked," I told the receptionist, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She's been tired, complaining of soreness." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Dr. Reynolds had seen Hannah since she was a toddler. A kind woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her ponytail and reading glasses always perched halfway down her nose. She was the kind of doctor who still remembered birthdays and didn't rush through appointments. She looked at me over the tops of her glasses as she read the intake form. "No fever? No recent injuries?" I hesitated. "Just, please take a closer look. I think something's wrong." I waited in the hallway while she examined Hannah. Each second dragged. The walls felt narrower, the air heavier. I could hear faint voices through the door, low and careful. When Dr. Reynolds finally called me in, her face was tight. She had shut the door behind me with a softness that scared me more than any slammed one ever could. "Evelyn," she said, "I'm going to be direct." My hands curled into fists. "There are signs of repeated physical trauma. Some new, some old. This isn't from falling down." My throat tightened. Could it be something else?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "No, this was done to her." I closed my eyes. My knees went weak. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. "I'm required to file a report," she continued, "with CPS. You should prepare for that." I nodded. "Yes, please." On the drive home, Hannah sat in the back seat, quiet, her arms wrapped around her backpack like armor. I watched her in the mirror. She was 9, but she looked older that day, like someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "You're not in trouble," I said gently. "You were very brave." She didn't answer. I wanted to pull over. I wanted to hold her and cry and scream and tell her everything was going to be okay. But I didn't, because I couldn't promise that yet. When we got home, Richard's car was still in the driveway. My heart thudded. "Go to your room," I told Hannah softly. "I'll bring you a snack in a bit." I stepped into the kitchen to find him on the phone, laughing about a golf tournament. He wore that smug grin that made everyone think he was harmless. When he hung up, he turned to me. "You were out for a while. Everything okay?" I stared at him, at the man who kissed our daughter goodnight after hurting her, who told her she wouldn't be believed. I took Hannah to see Dr. Reynolds. His smile faltered just a little. "Yeah? She sick?" I watched him, carefully. He was good at controlling his face, but I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the calculation. "She's filing a report." There it was, a full second of silence. Then he laughed. "A report? Evelyn, come on. What, because she bruised her back at recess? You know, kids..." I saw the marks. I saw them with my own eyes. He took a step toward me. Not threatening. Not yet. Just firm. "You're being dramatic," he said. "We both know how sensitive you get. Always have. Always making something out of nothing. I have photos." That stopped him. He recovered quickly. "You want to start a war in this family? Ruin Hannah's future because of some scratch? Don't," I said quietly. "Don't you dare pretend this is about her." His voice lowered, flat and cold. "You think they'll believe you? A housewife with anxiety? A woman who can't even manage dinner without spilling her plate?" I felt like I was shrinking, and then something inside me stood up. "I've already told someone else," I said. "A friend. She's a mandated reporter. You can't erase this." He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw it clearly, not love, not even anger, just control, like I was a problem to solve. He stepped back, smiled again. "You're emotional. I get it. We'll talk when you calm down." He walked upstairs as if nothing had happened. That night, I slept in Hannah's room again. I locked the door. I kept my phone on the nightstand, camera ready. Every sound in the house felt like a threat. The next morning, Dorothy called. I didn't answer. Then she showed up. "I heard you took Hannah to the doctor," she said sharply, pushing her way inside. "Are you trying to cause a scandal?" "A scandal?" I repeated. "Is that what you call this?" "She's a child, Evelyn. Children bruise. They make things up." I stepped closer. "You've known, haven't you?" Dorothy's jaw tensed. "She told you. Or you saw something. And you did nothing." She didn't deny it. "My son," she said quietly, "has a future, a family. You want to throw all that away because you're having a nervous breakdown? I'm protecting my daughter. You're destroying your husband." I stared at her. "He did that himself." She exhaled. "If this goes public, do you know what it'll do to us? To the Moores? I don't care what it does to your name." Dorothy left, slamming the door behind her. Later that night, Linda called me back. Her voice was calm, steady, the way I remembered. "You did the right thing," she said. "CPS will probably contact you in a few days. I'll help however I can." "Thank you," I whispered. After I hung up, I sat on the couch and stared into the dark. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I thought about all the times I had let things go, all the years I had chosen silence, all the dinners where I had laughed along, even as something inside me crumbled. This house had watched everything. It had seen me shrink. It had seen Hannah suffer. And now, it would watch something else. It would watch me fight. I've come to understand that monsters don't always hide under beds or in closets. Sometimes, they sit across the breakfast table, reading the paper, asking if you'd like more coffee. Richard hadn't touched Hannah in the days following the doctor's appointment. Not directly, but the atmosphere in the house thickened, quieter, colder. He didn't raise his voice, didn't slam a single door. He didn't have to. His control was silence, presence, the constant performance of being just harmless enough. That morning, he walked into the kitchen like any other husband might, shirt tucked in, tie knotted neatly, his face clean-shaven. The smell of aftershave and something darker clung to him. I was pouring cereal for Hannah. He leaned against the counter. "So," he said casually, "CPS coming today?" I didn't answer. He chuckled. "They're going to love this place. Spotless, quiet, well-behaved kid, perfect dad. You're not going to talk your way out of this." "Oh, Ev," he said, voice almost affectionate. "You really think I haven't been through worse? You forget who you're married to." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You think they'll listen to a fragile little housewife with emotional history? A woman who's been on anxiety meds for 6 years? I didn't respond. Because I was recording. The small device was buried in my pocket, on and active. I'd started carrying it 2 days ago. Linda's suggestion, "Don't try to fight this with emotion," she warned. You need evidence. They won't believe what they can't hear. That afternoon, I received a call. CPS would be visiting the next day. I told Hannah gently, crouching beside her as she did her homework. Some people are coming to talk to us tomorrow, I said. They just want to make sure everything's okay. Her pencil stopped moving. She didn't look up. Will I get in trouble? She whispered. Never. She finally looked at me. What if they believe him? The truth sat between us like a ghost. They won't, I said. I promise. That night, Richard came home later than usual. He smelled of bourbon and arrogance. He walked past me without a word and poured himself a drink, sat on the couch like a king waiting for the show to start. Big day tomorrow, he said. Should I wear a tie? Wear whatever makes you feel honest, I said. He smirked. You're trying to provoke me. I'm done trying. He stood, crossed the room slowly, and stared at me. Do you know what happens when good men get pushed too far, Evelyn? I looked up at him. You were never a good man. He chuckled. You sound brave now. Brave women don't survive long in court. He turned away, but I didn't move. I stayed on the couch, heart pounding, hands clenched. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I was finally starting to understand something. He wasn't invincible. He was desperate, and that made him dangerous. The next day, the social worker arrived just after noon. Her name was Clarissa, early 30s, plain blazer, calm voice. She introduced herself politely, then asked if she could speak to Hannah alone. I led her upstairs and knocked softly on Hannah's door. She's nice, I whispered. It's okay to talk to her. Hannah nodded once. I waited downstairs, each minute stretching into forever. I paced, replayed every detail, every bruise, every flinch, every note in her lunchbox. When they came back down, Clarissa thanked Hannah and sent her into the living room. She turned to me. I believe her. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. Tears stung my eyes. But belief isn't enough, she continued gently. I need documentation, photos, journals, anything. And most importantly, I need to know you're prepared for what comes next. I am, I said. Even if he denies everything, he will. Even if the family sides with him, they already have. Clarissa looked at me, studied me. You're going to need a lawyer. I have someone in mind. Good, she paused. You did the right thing, Mrs. Moore, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. She wasn't wrong. That night, Richard didn't come home. Dorothy did. She burst into the house with fire in her eyes and rage on her lips. What have you done? She snapped. You brought strangers into this house? You let them interrogate my granddaughter? She's my daughter, I said firmly. She's a Moore, Dorothy hissed, and you're tearing this family apart with your hysteria. I stood my ground. You know what he's done. I know, my son, she shot back. And I know you've always been unstable, always needing attention. Twisting stories. Are you even listening to yourself? I'm protecting my child. Dorothy laughed bitterly. By dragging her through social services, through court, do you know what this will do to her? Yes, I said quietly. It'll save her. Dorothy stepped forward, her face close to mine. You'll regret this, Evelyn. This family closes ranks. You're not one of us. I didn't flinch. I never wanted to be. She left, slamming the door so hard a photo frame fell from the wall. It cracked on the hardwood floor. I didn't pick it up. I walked to Hannah's room and sat beside her on the bed. Her face was pale, but her eyes searched mine. Did I do something wrong? She asked. I held her close. No, sweetheart, you did everything right. She rested her head against my shoulder. I don't want to be scared anymore. Neither do I. That night, I packed a small overnight bag just in case. I stashed cash, copies of Hannah's birth certificate, my IDs. I uploaded every photo and audio file to a cloud account Linda helped me set up. Because Clarissa was right. It was going to get worse. But now, I had something stronger than fear. I had truth. And I was finally ready to speak it out loud, in court, under oath, whatever it took. The first lie I told after learning the truth was a small one. It slipped out of my mouth the next morning, quiet and practiced, the way lies do when they've been rehearsed by fear. I'm fine, I said. I said it to Hannah as I brushed her hair before school, careful not to tug. I said it to the neighbor who waved from across the street. I said it to myself in the bathroom mirror, staring at a woman who looked older than she had a week ago. "I'm fine" became my shield, not because it was true, but because it bought me time. Time was what I needed most. Hannah moved through the house like a guest, cautious and silent. She asked permission to speak, permission to sit, permission to exist. Each request landed in my chest like a bruise I hadn't known I had. I answered gently, always yes, always soft, but the habit had already taken root in her. Trauma teaches children obedience first. Richard noticed the change. Of course he did. "You're spoiling her," he said that evening, watching as I cut Hannah's chicken into small pieces, even though she could do it herself. "She's going to expect special treatment forever." "She's a child," I replied. "She's dramatic," he corrected. "Just like you. I didn't rise to it. I couldn't afford to." The CPS visit had shaken him, but not enough to stop him from performing. If anything, it made him sharper, more careful. He started hugging Hannah in front of me, patting her shoulder, calling her champ. He never touched her when we were alone in the room anymore. He didn't need to. Fear does the work for men like him. That night, after Hannah was asleep, I went through my phone again. Photos, recordings, notes. I labeled everything by date and time, the way Linda had taught me. Organization turns pain into evidence, evidence into power. I created a second email account under a name Richard wouldn't recognize. I backed everything up twice. I wrote down every interaction that made my stomach knot. His words, his looks, the way he positioned himself between me and the door during arguments, just enough to remind me who controlled the space. I told myself I was being cautious. The truth was, I was terrified. The second lie I told was bigger. It came 2 days later, when Clarissa called to schedule a follow-up visit and asked if Hannah felt safe in the home. "Yes," I said. The word burned. Clarissa paused. "Mrs. Moore, you need to understand that what you say now affects what we can do next." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "She's safe." Hannah was sitting on the floor beside me, coloring. She looked up when I spoke, her eyes searching my face. I smiled at her. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I wasn't protecting Richard. I wasn't protecting the family. I was protecting Hannah from the consequences of moving too fast in a system that punishes women for being emotional and children for telling the truth too early. The system wants perfect victims, calm mothers, clean timelines. They don't like mess. They don't like fear. They don't like women who cry while asking for help. So I learned to lie with purpose. The house felt different after that. Smaller, as if the walls were listening, as if every word might be used later, twisted and played back to make me look unstable. Dorothy stopped calling. That worried me more than her shouting ever had. Richard became helpful, suspiciously so. He did the dishes, took out the trash, asked Hannah about school in a gentle voice that made my skin crawl. One night, he brought home ice cream. "Thought we could watch a movie," he said lightly. "Family night." Hannah stiffened. I smiled. She has a test tomorrow. Early bedtime. Richard's eyes narrowed for just a second. "You're isolating her," he said. "I'm parenting her." He leaned closer. "Be careful, Evelyn. People don't like women who try to control narratives." I met his gaze. "People don't like men who hurt children." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he laughed. "That's the kind of talk that gets women committed," he said softly. "You remember your breakdown, don't you?" I did. 5 years earlier, after Hannah was born, I'd struggled. Sleepless nights, panic attacks, a doctor who prescribed medication and called it postpartum anxiety. Richard had been understanding then, supportive. He attended appointments, held my hand. He also never let me forget it. I watched him now and realized something important. He had been preparing for this longer than I had. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, Richard's footsteps pacing downstairs long after midnight. I thought about running. I thought about packing Hannah up and disappearing into a motel 2 towns over, changing her school, changing our names, becoming shadows. But running would turn me into exactly what he wanted me to be. Unstable, paranoid, guilty. I needed to move carefully, intelligently. The next morning, I told Hannah another lie. "Everything is going to be okay," I said as she climbed into the car for school. She studied my face. "Is that a promise?" "Yes," I said. I didn't know how yet, but I meant it. That afternoon, Linda called. "I spoke to a friend of mine," she said quietly, "a family law attorney. She owes me a favor." My heart thudded. What did she say? That you need to document a pattern, not just abuse, control, manipulation, emotional harm, especially if the father is respected. "I can do that," I said. "I know you can. But Evelyn," Linda hesitated, "once you start this, there's no going back." "I already started," I replied. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then I wrote the truth. Every small one. Every humiliating one. Every moment I had swallowed my voice to survive another day. The lies I told were temporary. The truth was permanent. And I was done pretending I didn't know the difference. In our house, Sundays had always been for church. Richard never missed a service. He shook hands with elders, dropped crisp 20s into the collection plate, and bowed his head with the reverence of a man who had nothing to hide. That Sunday, I sat beside him in our usual pew, the right side near the stained glass. Hannah was between us, her hands folded politely, her eyes distant. She hadn't spoken much all morning. I'd helped her into her dress, brushed her hair, and whispered, "I'll be right beside you." But I could tell she didn't feel safe, not even in God's house. Richard wore his Sunday smile, the one that crinkled his eyes just enough to suggest warmth. People in the congregation nodded at him, whispered his name with admiration. "He's a rock," one woman said behind me. "That poor family's lucky to have him." I almost laughed, but it came out like a cough. The pastor spoke about forgiveness that morning, about broken homes and the power of healing through surrender. Every word twisted itself into something pointed, like a sermon designed to shame me without ever naming me. I glanced at Richard once. He was nodding along, his arm resting lightly on the back of the pew behind Hannah. To anyone watching, we looked like a devoted family. To me, it felt like a lie carved into glass clear, permanent, impossible to scrub away. After the service, we stood in the lobby, surrounded by familiar faces. Dorothy appeared, her lips painted in war colors, her perfume overwhelming. "Evelyn," she said sweetly, "you should consider bringing Hannah to youth group again. It builds structure." "She's already got plenty of structure," I replied evenly. "She needs discipline, not distance," Dorothy said, flashing her fake smile as other members passed. "Don't let your personal troubles make you selfish." I turned slightly, shielding Hannah behind me. "And don't let your shame make you blind." Dorothy's smile dropped a fraction, but she recovered fast. Richard joined us with a styrofoam cup of coffee. "Everything okay here?" "Just catching up," Dorothy said brightly. "You know how women get." He looked at me. "You look pale." "I'm fine." I lied again. He leaned in. "Don't start something here, Evelyn." I tilted my head. "You brought us here." He didn't respond. Back home, the atmosphere returned to stillness. Hannah went upstairs to change. I stood in the kitchen, still in my church dress, staring out the window at the garden I never had time to tend anymore. Richard stepped behind me. Close, too close. "You embarrassed my mother." She humiliated herself. He chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're going to ruin Hannah's childhood with your performance." "No," I said, turning to face him. "You already did." He slammed his hand on the counter, just once, hard. A plate rattled in the sink. "You think you'll win?" he hissed. "You think the system favors women like you? You've got no job, no income, you're anxious, you take pills, and your own family won't back you. The court sees you as unstable. I'm the safe one, Evelyn. I'm the stable one." I didn't flinch. I wanted to, but I didn't. I recorded that. His eyes froze. "I have it all, your threats, your insults, your Sunday lies. And I'm not scared anymore." His voice dropped. "You're bluffing." I held up my phone, pressed play. His own voice echoed back. "You're going to ruin her future. Unstable. Emotional history." He lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. "I've got backups. Try anything, and this goes to everyone." His hands curled into fists, but he didn't move again. That night, I emailed Linda all the recordings. I sent copies to Clarissa, to the attorney Linda recommended, and to a secure drive I named Truth for Hannah. If something happened to me, I wanted the story to live. I tucked Hannah into bed with a flashlight, a stuffed rabbit, and a safety plan. "If you ever feel scared and I'm not with you," I said gently, "you go to Mrs. Langston across the street. You don't wait. You don't hesitate." "Okay," she whispered. "And remember," I added, brushing her hair back, "you are not the one who did something wrong, even if people think I did?" "Yes," I said, "especially then." Later, I stood in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired. There were lines on my face that hadn't been there a year ago, but behind the exhaustion was something else. Resolve. The kind you earn. I walked to my bedroom. Richard was already in bed, watching some finance show with the volume low. He didn't look up. I climbed into bed beside him. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to keep him close until I was ready to break this clean. I stared at the ceiling, counting days, counting truths, counting the moments until we were free. The first time the door locked behind me, I didn't realize it was on purpose. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every way that matters until it doesn't. Hannah was at school. The house was quiet. I was folding laundry in the bedroom, trying to pretend that normal still existed, when I heard the sound. Click. Subtle. Almost polite. I walked to the door and turned the handle. It didn't move. At first I thought it was old hardware. The house had quirks. Doors stuck. Locks jammed. I tried again, harder this time. Nothing. I knocked. "Richard?" Silence. My heart began to race, but I forced myself to breathe. Panic is what men like him count on. Panic makes women sloppy. I stepped back and took out my phone. No signal, not even emergency bars. That's when I noticed it, the router lights in the hallway dark. Power still on. Internet deliberately cut. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. 10 minutes later, the door unlocked. Richard stood there, calm, holding his phone. "You should really stop wandering around the house recording things," he said mildly. "It's unhealthy." I stood slowly. "You locked me in." He shrugged. "You were upset. I thought you needed time to calm down." "That's false imprisonment." He smiled. "You always exaggerate." I didn't argue. I walked past him, my legs steady even though my hands were shaking. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. Tuesday. Door locked from outside. Internet disabled. 10 minutes. I slept with my phone under my pillow. 2 days later, Clarissa called again. Her voice was careful, professional, strained. "There's been a development," she said. "Your husband has filed a report expressing concern about your mental health." I closed my eyes. "Of course he has. He claims you've been paranoid, recording him, isolating Hannah, creating false narratives. And you believe him?" "I believe there's a conflict," she replied gently, "which means we have to proceed carefully." Carefully. That word again? "Is Hannah in danger?" I asked. There was a pause. "At this moment, we don't have grounds to remove her." "And me?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm recommending a psychological evaluation," Clarissa said. "Standard procedure." Standard. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain I'd scrubbed 1,000 times. This was his move. I saw it clearly now. He wasn't denying the abuse. He was erasing the witness. That evening, Richard came home with flowers. Pink lilies, my favorite, once. "Peace offering," he said lightly. "I hate seeing us like this." I took the flowers and placed them in the sink, didn't fill the vase, didn't thank him. He sighed. "CPS called me today. They're worried about you." "I'm sure they are." "They suggested an evaluation," he continued, watching me carefully. "I think it's a good idea." "You think locking me in a room is a good idea too?" "That never happened," he said smoothly. I looked at him. "I have a recording." His smile didn't falter. "Then play it. Let's hear how unhinged you sound." That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until Richard was snoring, then slipped out of bed and went to Hannah's room. I knelt beside her bed, watching her breathe, memorizing the way her chest rose and fell. "I'm going to protect you," I whispered, "even if I have to let them think I'm broken." The evaluation was scheduled for Friday. The psychiatrist's office smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Diplomas lined the wall. Richard sat beside me in the waiting room, his hand resting lightly on my knee like a husband concerned. The doctor was a man in his 60s. Calm voice, gentle questions. How long have you felt anxious, Evelyn? How would you describe your marriage? Do you ever feel overwhelmed? I answered honestly, carefully. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I spoke slowly, deliberately. When Richard spoke, he was full of concern. She's been under a lot of stress, he said, imagining things, fixating. I'm just worried about her stability. The doctor nodded. Afterward, Richard squeezed my shoulder. You did great, he said. See? Nothing to be afraid of. But I was afraid, because even calm women get diagnosed. That night, Dorothy called. You've gone too far, she said without greeting. Do you know what people are saying? I don't care. You should, she snapped. If the court decides you're unfit, Hannah stays with us. With him? With family, Dorothy corrected. I hung up without replying. The next morning, Linda came over. She looked tired, angry. They're trying to discredit you, she said. Textbook, but you're doing everything right. It doesn't feel like it. It never does when you're the one telling the truth. She handed me a card. This is a domestic violence attorney. Quiet, smart. She knows how these men operate. I took it like it was oxygen. That afternoon, I packed a bag for Hannah and left it in the trunk of my car. Clothes, her favorite book, her rabbit. Not because I planned to run, because I planned to be ready. That evening, Richard stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching me cook. You know, he said casually, if you just admit you're struggling, this could all go away. I turned to face him. You're not taking my daughter. His eyes hardened. Watch me. I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed a button in my pocket. Recording. Later that night, after he went to bed, I emailed the file to 3 different places. If he wanted to make me disappear, he'd have to do it in the light. And men like Richard hate the light. On the surface, everything looked normal. Hannah went to school. Richard went to work. I watered the garden out front with a forced smile for the neighbors. We played the role of the family that had it all together. But beneath that fragile veneer, everything was shifting. Every moment I stayed was part of a plan now, a strategy. I had stopped reacting, stopped fighting Richard in open confrontation. I let him believe he was winning. That's what terrified him most. Men like Richard need resistance. It's how they perform. Without it, they lose control of the stage. That week, I began preparing for the custody battle. Linda's attorney, Simone Thatcher, met with me in secret in an office tucked in a quiet corner of a strip mall, deliberately unassuming. She had the voice of someone who'd seen the worst and stopped being surprised by it. You've got a complicated case, she said, flipping through my notes, photos, and audio recordings. But you've also got something most women in your position don't. What's that? Documentation. I stayed silent. Simone continued. This is going to get ugly. He's already tried to paint you as unstable. If he thinks he's losing Hannah, he'll go further. I know, I said. You need character witnesses. People who've seen his behavior. People who will testify. Most of them are scared of him. Then we find the ones who aren't. She handed me a list. Potential allies, former co-workers, teachers, neighbors, people who might have noticed bruises, heard shouting, seen something, even if they didn't know what it was. Start quietly, Simone warned. Don't alert him. I didn't. That night, I went through my contacts and sent quiet messages to 3 people. Mrs. Langston across the street, Hannah's 2nd-grade teacher, and a former friend of Richard's who'd stopped coming around after a mysterious argument years ago. Each message was simple. Can we talk? Privately. It's about Hannah. 2 responded. The 3rd, the teacher, sent back a single sentence. I always knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. I cried in the bathroom so no one would hear. 2 days later, Richard began turning the pressure up again. He started coming home early, sitting in silence in the living room, watching me, not speaking, not yelling, just watching. He moved Hannah's toothbrush into our bathroom, said it was to keep an eye on her. He took over drop-off and pick-up duties at school. When I asked why, he smiled and said, "Just trying to help." I started documenting the changes in a private journal, hidden in a flour tin. Thursday. He stood outside the bathroom door while I showered, didn't speak, just stood there. Friday. He questioned Hannah for 20 minutes about who she talks to at recess. She cried afterward. I showed Linda the entries. "He's isolating her," she said, "and he's trying to make you unravel." I nodded. "He's trying to make me the villain." "You're not," she said, "but you have to stay ahead of him." I called Clarissa and updated her on the increased control. "We're building a profile," she said. "You're doing the right thing, but the system moves slow." "I don't have time for slow." "We're working on it, just keep Hannah safe." I hung up and stared out the window. Hannah was in the backyard, sitting on the swing. Her stuffed rabbit was in her lap, its ear frayed from years of worry fingering. She looked so small from where I stood, so breakable. That weekend, Richard invited his family over. He framed it as a healing dinner. "We need to present unity," he said. "Dorothy's upset. She thinks we're unraveling." "We are unraveling," I replied. He smiled. "No, Evelyn, you are." I cooked the entire meal. Dorothy brought wine and unsolicited advice. "You know," she said mid-toast, "children sense anxiety. It's contagious. You should smile more." I didn't answer. After dessert, while the others lingered in the living room, Richard pulled me into the hallway. "I think it's time we talked settlement," he said. My blood ran cold. "Settlement? For custody. You step away quietly, and we keep things civil. Maybe a visitation schedule. We can even make sure you get help." "Help?" He leaned closer. "You can either lose her the loud way or the quiet way, but you're going to lose her." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had sealed shut. Later that night, after everyone left, Hannah came into my room holding her rabbit. "Daddy says I might live with him more." I pulled her into my lap. "You will always live with love, baby, wherever you are." Her eyes searched mine. "But not with you?" "I'm fighting to make sure that doesn't happen." She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Do people believe you?" "Some do." "What about the others?" "They will." I held her for a long time that night, memorized the weight of her in my arms, the way she sighed when she finally felt safe. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with the teacher who responded to my message. We sat in a coffee shop far from town. "She drew pictures," the teacher said softly. "Sad ones, and once she told me her daddy was different when doors closed." "Did you document that?" I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe I was overreacting. "You weren't!" She reached into her purse and handed me a folder. I kept some of the drawings. I don't know why. I opened it. Crayon figures. A small girl, a tall man, no faces. One picture had a single sentence scrawled in messy letters. "Mom doesn't know when the door closes." I swallowed hard. This helps." "Whatever you need," the teacher said. "I'll testify." When I got home, Richard was in the garage, pretending to work on the car. I walked past him with my head high, folder tucked under my arm like armor. Because it was. This wasn't just a war of words anymore. It was a quiet rebellion. And every truth I gathered made me stronger. In the weeks that followed, the mask Richard wore began to crack. It started with small things. A slammed door, a snapped command, a visible twitch in his smile when people didn't respond the way he expected. Control, once subtle and smooth, became desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. That Friday morning, the first of those mistakes arrived in the mail. A letter from the school district. It stated that Hannah had been absent for 3 half-days in the past month excused, but unaccompanied by written notes. Curious, considering I hadn't known about them. I read it twice. Then again, she'd left school early. I asked her gently over dinner, careful not to look accusing. "Sweetheart, do you remember leaving school early last week?" Hannah paused, fork midair. "Daddy picked me up," she said. My hand clenched under the table. "What for?" "He said you weren't feeling good. That you asked him to." "I didn't." Hannah frowned, confused. "But he said you told him." I smiled gently. "It's okay, baby. I just wanted to be sure." That night, I emailed Clarissa and Simone the letter, along with a summary of our conversation. Simone replied within minutes. "This is good. It shows unauthorized interference. Pattern of manipulation. It was the first real crack in Richard's legal facade. But it was more than that. It was proof that he was using Hannah's trust against her." I felt sick. The next day, I confronted him. Not with anger, not with tears, but with fact. "You took Hannah out of school without my knowledge," I said flatly. "I was helping," he replied. "You looked tired that week." "You forged my name," he smiled, condescending. "You're seeing conspiracies again." I reported it. His smile vanished. "I've informed the attorney. And the school. Do it again, and there will be legal consequences." He didn't respond right away. He stared at me, eyes narrowed, calculating. Then he laughed. "You're serious." "I am." He stepped closer, the smile returning. "You're starting to sound like someone who wants to fight. I thought you were all about peace." "I'm all about Hannah." He leaned in, voice low. "You're going to destroy that girl's life just to win." "No," I said. "You already started that. I'm here to stop it." From that day forward, Richard became reckless. He began patrolling my movements, checking my phone, following me to the grocery store, asking about every interaction. At night, he watched me sleep, pretending it was concern. But I saw the doubt growing in him. I saw the cracks in his performance. He was losing control. And control was everything to Richard. A week later, the teacher who had saved Hannah's drawings, Miss Campbell, sent me a scanned copy of another one she had kept. It was dated almost a year ago. The drawing showed 3 figures again: the tall man, the small girl, and this time, a third figure, a woman, stood on the edge of the page, her arms reaching, but her face erased. Below it, Hannah had written, "I think Mommy is far away, even when she's close." I couldn't breathe. That night, I held Hannah tighter than usual during bedtime. I read her 3 stories instead of 1. I stayed in the room long after she fell asleep, watching her chest rise and fall. The next morning, Simone called. "We have enough now," she said. "We're filing for emergency custody." My heart stopped. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We have documentation of emotional manipulation, suspected abuse, school interference, control. And now with the teacher's drawings, it paints a full picture." "When?" "Tomorrow. The court date will be fast." I hung up and sat down on the kitchen floor. We were finally moving. That evening, I told Hannah the truth. Not all of it, but the part that mattered. "There might be changes coming soon," I said. "Changes that are going to keep you safe." She looked up, scared. "Is Daddy going to be mad?" I didn't lie this time. "Yes, but I'll be with you, and you'll be okay." "Will I live with you?" "Yes," I said. "Always, if I can help it." She nodded, small and serious. Then she whispered, "Sometimes, I think Daddy hears me thinking." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked down. "Like, even when I don't say anything, he still gets mad. Like he knows." I swallowed. "You're very brave." She shook her head. "No, I'm scared all the time. That's what makes you brave." That night, I didn't sleep. I packed 2 bags, one for her, one for me. Just in case. I printed out every document, email, and drawing, made 5 copies, gave 1 to Linda, 1 to the lawyer, 1 to the neighbor across the street, hid 1 in the trunk of the car. I left the 5th in a box labeled "For Court" in the hall closet, because if they made me prove this battle was real, I would. The next morning, we woke early. I dressed Hannah in her favorite yellow sweater and kissed her forehead. The court would decide soon. But I already knew. The storm was here, and I was finally ready for it. The courthouse didn't feel like justice. It felt cold. Fluorescent lights, polished floors, a hush so thick it pressed against my chest. I walked in with Simone at my side, clutching a folder I had reviewed 27 times. My hands trembled, but my spine did not. Across the waiting area, Richard sat beside Dorothy. He wore his navy suit, the one he saved for weddings and funerals. His hair was combed flat. His eyes met mine, calm, smug, unreadable. Dorothy gave me a tight, bitter smile. I didn't return it. "Don't react," Simone whispered. "Let the evidence speak." I nodded. At 9:17 a.m., the clerk called our case. Moore versus Moore. Petition for emergency custody. We walked into the courtroom. The judge was a woman, mid-50s, sharp eyes, neutral expression. Her robe carried more weight than anything Richard had ever thrown at me. Simone opened first. She laid out the documentation recordings, teacher testimony, the CPS interviews, the drawings, the school interference. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. The truth, arranged properly, doesn't shout. Then it was Richard's turn. He began with charm. Always charm. "My wife has been through a lot," he said. "She's been unstable for years. Postpartum issues, medication. I've always supported her, but lately, she's changed." He told the court I was paranoid, that I coached Hannah, that I made up stories because I couldn't cope with motherhood. He had no evidence, only tone. Dorothy spoke next. "Evelyn's behavior has been erratic. I don't believe she's a danger, but she's not well. Children need stability." My stomach twisted. Then came Clarissa, the CPS worker, calm, professional, direct. "There are red flags on both sides," she said. But the child, Hannah, disclosed concerns that cannot be ignored. She expressed fear. She used specific language that indicates exposure to inappropriate boundaries, and she trusted her mother enough to share it. The judge listened carefully. Simone stood again. "Your Honor, this isn't about perfection. It's about protection. The father's behavior, locking rooms, isolating the child, interfering with school, gaslighting his wife, shows a pattern of control. The child is emotionally at risk. We ask for immediate physical custody to be granted to the mother until a full investigation is complete." The room was silent. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Moore, do you have anything to say?" I stood. My knees almost buckled. Then I remembered Hannah's drawing. "Mommy is far away, even when she's close." I took a breath. "My daughter came to me," I said. "She trusted me when she was scared. And every day since, I've tried to protect her not just from what happened, but from being erased. I'm not perfect, but I'm present. I'm not broken. I'm aware. And I will not stand by while anyone hurts her again." My voice did not crack. The judge nodded. She glanced at the file again, then at the bailiff. "Custody will be awarded to the mother on a temporary emergency basis, pending further investigation. The father is granted supervised visitation only." Dorothy gasped. Richard's jaw clenched. But I didn't look at them. I was too busy holding back tears. Not of fear, of relief. Simone leaned in. "We did it." "No," I whispered. "Hannah did." Outside the courtroom, Hannah was waiting with Linda. When she saw me, she ran. I knelt and opened my arms. She threw herself into them, sobbing with relief I didn't realize she'd been holding. "I thought you'd lose," she whispered. "Not this time," I said, holding her close. "Not ever again." Back home, the house felt different. Not safe, not yet, but quieter. I changed the locks, installed cameras. Simone filed for a restraining order. Richard tried calling twice. I didn't answer. Dorothy sent a letter, said I was vindictive, that I would regret it. I didn't reply. The silence was better. That night, Hannah placed her rabbit on my bed. "You can sleep with him," she said. "If you get scared," I held back tears. "Thank you," I whispered. "I think he'll keep us both safe." That was the first night in months I slept through until morning. No fear. No footsteps. Just my daughter's breathing. And the quiet, steady rhythm of hope returning. Winning custody didn't end the war, it just changed the battlefield. For the first few days, it felt like breathing in a house that no longer pressed against my ribs. The tension that had wrapped around every doorknob and shadowed every room had loosened, but it hadn't disappeared. Richard was still out there, and silence, I'd learned, could be the most dangerous noise. I focused on rebuilding our rhythms. Hannah and I made breakfast together every morning. She poured the milk too fast, and cereal spilled across the counter. We laughed about it. On the third day, she turned to me and said, "It feels like we live in a new house." "We do," I said. "Same walls, different rules." But the damage lived in small moments. When the doorbell rang unexpectedly, she flinched. If a car slowed outside, her eyes darted to the window. One afternoon, I caught her placing her rabbit against the front door, like a sentry. "What's he doing there?" I asked. "Guarding," she said simply. She hadn't asked about her father, not once. That silence, too, was its own kind of grief. One afternoon, Linda came by with groceries and a new security system. As we installed the cameras, I noticed her pause at the photo frames still lining the hallway. "You haven't taken these down," she said gently. "The photos. Richard holding Hannah as a baby, us at the beach, Hannah's 5th birthday, where Richard had insisted on dressing like a clown because it made her laugh. I hadn't touched any of them, not because I wanted to remember, but because I was afraid of what would grow in their absence. "You'll know when you're ready," Linda said, brushing dust from the corner of one. Later that night, I stood in the hallway alone. I stared at the photos. The smile on Richard's face in each one looked different now. Not joyful, performed. I took down the first frame. Then another. I left one, the one of Hannah, age 3, sitting in the garden with her rabbit. Alone, peaceful, hers. The wall looked emptier, but not lonelier. 2 days later, the first threat arrived. An email. Untraceable. No name. "You think this is over. She'll come back to me. Just wait." I forwarded it to Simone. She escalated it to the judge and filed for a no-contact clause to be added to the custody agreement. "It's starting," Simone warned. "Men like him don't disappear. They regroup." I told Hannah we were taking a short break from school. A vacation, I called it. Just the two of us. We drove north, to a cabin a friend of Linda's owned. Wooded, private, quiet. For the first time in months, we walked outside without looking over our shoulders. Hannah collected rocks and made potions with leaves and water. We painted, we cooked over a fire pit. We talked. It was during one of these afternoons when the sun filtered through the trees just right that she asked the question, "Do you think he'll come find us?" I looked at her. Honest, tired, brave. "I don't know," I said. "But if he does, we'll be ready." She nodded, then handed me a painted rock. "I made it for you. It's strong, like a shield." I held it in my palm. It was warm from her touch. That night, I emailed Simone again. "I'm ready to testify," I wrote. "Not just for custody, for the full case. I want him on record." The next morning, Simone replied, "Then we begin phase 2. I packed our bags. We returned home 3 days later. The house felt different now. The cameras blinked. The walls echoed less. I placed Hannah's rock on the mantel. A new kind of photo. A new kind of frame. A symbol that said, "We are not afraid anymore." Testifying against your husband feels like pulling your own rib out. Not because you miss him, but because he once lived inside your world, your home, your child, your memories. And now, to save yourself, you have to prove that he poisoned it all. Simone prepared me like a general before battle. We spent hours reviewing timelines, rehearsing answers. She warned me about Richard's lawyer, a man known for charisma and cruelty. "He'll try to rattle you," she said. "Twist your words. Shift the narrative." "I won't shake," I said. "You might," she replied gently. "And that's okay. Just don't retreat." The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday. Family court again, same judge, but this time it wasn't about temporary custody. It was about truth, about protection, about making the record permanent. That morning, I dressed with intention. Simple clothes, no jewelry, no makeup, not to look weak, but to look real. Hannah stayed with Linda. I kissed her forehead before leaving and said, "Whatever happens today, you are safe. That doesn't change." She didn't ask where I was going. She already knew. Richard sat across the courtroom, alone this time. No Dorothy, no allies. His expression was unreadable. But his eyes, they tracked my every move like I was prey. Simone opened the case. She presented evidence, the drawings, the recordings, the school interference. She reminded the court that this wasn't just about custody, but about a pattern of psychological control and suspected abuse. Then she called me to the stand. I walked with steady steps, sat, took the oath, and looked at the judge. Not Richard, never him. Simone began. "Mrs. Moore, when did you first begin to suspect your daughter was being harmed?" I breathed slowly. The night she passed me a note at dinner. It said, "Mom, when no one is looking, can you check my back?" A hush fell across the room. "And what did you find?" "A bruise, in the shape of a hand, low on her spine." Simone nodded, then asked me to describe the months that followed. I told it like a story, a quiet one. No dramatics, just facts, dates, words, eyes. When she asked about the night I was locked in the bedroom, I hesitated for the first time. Not because I couldn't speak, but because I remembered exactly how it felt. I described the door clicking shut, the missing Wi-Fi, the silence. "How long were you locked in?" she asked. 10 minutes. "And what did he say afterward?" "That I was imagining things." A lie I'd swallowed too many times. Richard's lawyer rose. He was sleek, silver-haired, and smiled like a man who didn't believe in regret. "Mrs. Moore," he began smoothly, "you claim to have been locked in a room, but there's no physical evidence, no police report, just your word." "I didn't report it then," I said, "because I was still trying to survive the marriage. Isn't it true," he continued, "that you have a history of anxiety, of emotional instability?" "Yes," I said evenly, "because I was living with a man who made me question my reality." He paused. "Do you think your mental health impairs your ability to see the situation clearly?" "No," I said. "I think it helps me see who I am now." He pressed on, asked about my parenting, why I didn't leave sooner, why I stayed. I answered each question calmly, truthfully, and then he asked, "Mrs. Moore, do you believe your daughter is telling the truth?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And if she isn't?" "She is." "And if she was coached subtly, unknowingly by a mother with trauma and fear?" I met his gaze. "Then she'd still be safer with me than with a man who makes her afraid to speak." He faltered for half a second. "Just enough." Simone stood again. No further questions. I stepped down and returned to my seat, breath shallow but proud. Then the judge called for a recess. We stepped outside into the hallway, sunlight streaking through dusty courthouse windows. Simone put a hand on my shoulder. "You did everything right." I nodded, too drained to reply. An hour later, we were called back in. The judge reviewed the evidence again in silence. Then she spoke. "Based on the testimony, documentation, and professional reports, I find grounds to continue full physical custody with the mother. The court orders mandatory supervised visitation for the father pending psychiatric evaluation and further review." Richard didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just stared at me. And for the first time in years, I didn't look away. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I'd ever been. At home, Hannah waited by the window. When she saw me pull in, she ran. "Did we win?" she asked. I scooped her up, kissed her hair. "We're winning," I said. "Every day we choose safety, we win." She grinned. "Want to see what I made?" In the living room, she showed me a drawing. 2 girls, one big, one little, both holding shields. I knelt beside her. "Who are they?" She smiled. "You and me. Justice isn't a finish line, it's a door, and once you walk through it, you have to face everything waiting on the other side." For weeks after the hearing, I lived in what I can only describe as limbo. We were safer, but not safe. Richard didn't reach out directly. The court order made that a risk for him, but I began to notice things. The tire pressure light blinking for no reason. A mailbox dented in the middle of the night. A shadow parked 2 blocks down, always facing the house. Subtle, untraceable, but felt, I told Simone. She documented everything, added it to the file. "We can't prove intent," she said, "but we can prove pattern." Still, I checked the locks 3 times each night. Still, I walked Hannah to school and waited outside until she was safely through the door. Still, I slept with my phone on my chest. One Thursday morning, Hannah came home with an art project. A paper chain made of colored loops, one for every safe person in her life. Each loop had a name. Mommy, Linda, Miss Campbell, Simone, Officer Torres, the community officer assigned to our case, even the school nurse. Richard's name wasn't on it. She looked at me hesitantly. "Is it okay if he's not there?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, this is your chain. You decide who belongs in it." She smiled. "Good, because I don't feel safe when he's around." Her words sliced clean through the guilt that still clung to me like fog. It wasn't just me who saw him clearly now. She did too. That night, I sat down with Linda over tea. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Getting out?" Linda paused, stirring her cup with slow precision. "Sometimes," she said, "I miss the idea of what life was supposed to be, but not what it was." I nodded. She looked at me. "You're doing it right. You're breaking the circle." The circle? Abuse, silence, inheritance. It's a loop, until someone decides it ends with them. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The legacy I leave her won't be fear. It will be the knowledge that she can say no, that her voice matters, that silence doesn't keep peace, it feeds monsters." A week later, Richard's psychiatric evaluation was released. Simone called me at work. Are you sitting down? Yes. There's a diagnosis. Narcissistic tendencies. Aggressive response to perceived loss of control. The court has grounds to suspend visitation entirely pending further review. I closed my eyes. Will they? They likely will. But there's more. She hesitated. He's filed a civil suit. My stomach dropped. For defamation. He's claiming your accusations ruined his career prospects and social reputation. I almost laughed. But he's not pressing criminal charges? No, it's intimidation. Paper warfare. I swallowed. What do? We respond. We file to dismiss, and we prepare because this is how these men continue to control. Through fear, through courtrooms, through wearing you down. I nodded, numb. That night, I told Hannah I might have to be in court again. Are we in trouble? She asked. No, I said. He is, but he doesn't like losing. And sometimes when people like that lose, they throw tantrums. Like toddlers? Exactly. She tilted her head. Can we make another shield? I blinked. What do you mean? Our drawing. It only had one. We need more. We spent the evening with paper and glue, cutting shapes, drawing symbols, stars, trees, names. We made one for each of the safe people. A whole wall of shields. Not just to protect, but to remind that love can be loud too. That community can be armor. That breaking a circle leaves room for something new. By late April, the days had grown longer, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't wake up dreading the sun. But peace, real peace, is not just the absence of violence. It's the presence of something better, something new. It was Linda who first suggested we move. The house carries too many ghosts, she said. You've sanitized the surfaces but not the air. She was right. Every corner whispered. Every squeaky floorboard echoed. So I started looking. Quietly, privately. Somewhere close enough for Hannah's school, but far enough that Richard couldn't use the address he still had to show up on our street again. That's how we found it. A pale yellow bungalow on Willow Street, 2 bedrooms, a small garden in front, and most importantly, sunlight. So much sunlight. When we first visited, Hannah ran into the living room and spun in circles. It smells like cookies, she squealed. It didn't. It smelled like paint and possibility. But I understood what she meant. We moved in 2 weeks later. It felt like shedding skin. The first night in the new house, we didn't unpack. We lay on sleeping bags in the living room and watched the moon through the window. No TV, no distractions. Just quiet. What will we do here? Hannah asked. Whatever we want, I said. This house isn't for surviving. It's for living. In the days that followed, I filled the walls not with photos of the past, but with Hannah's drawings. A paper garden bloomed across the hallway. Stars and shields and animals in bright colors. At night, she slept soundly. No whispers. No rabbit by the door. Just breath. Just dreams. Then, the mail arrived. Thick, formal, unwanted. A subpoena. Richard's defamation suit was officially proceeding. Simone met me in the new kitchen. She looked at the fresh flowers on the counter and sighed. He never stops. But I do, I said. I don't play by his rules anymore. She handed me a folder. We're filing to dismiss. His claim is weak. But we still have to show up. When? June. I nodded. It wasn't fear I felt. It was exhaustion dressed as determination. Before Simone left, she paused at Hannah's wall of drawings. She pointed at one, a tree with open hands as leaves. She drew this? Yes. Simone smiled. This one wins the case before we even walk in. A week later, Hannah received a letter. From Dorothy. I found it in the mailbox, handwritten. No return address. It began formally, but quickly spiraled. You've poisoned my son. You've taught my granddaughter to fear her father. I hope you're proud of yourself. I threw it in the trash. Then I paused, pulled it back out, photographed it, sent it to Simone. Pattern, I wrote in the message. Extended family harassment. She replied, added to the file. That night, I didn't cry. I baked cookies. Real ones this time. Hannah helped, flour streaking her cheeks. We danced in the kitchen while the oven hummed, and I realized I hadn't smiled like that in years. Later, we sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, sharing still warm cookies while the streetlights flickered on. "Do you think he's still mad?" Hannah asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "Do you think he'll stop?" "Eventually. Or the law will stop him." She leaned against me. "You're not scared anymore." I looked at her. Strong, awake, unafraid. "No," I said, "because we're not in his house anymore. We were in ours." And that made all the difference. By June, the flowers in front of the house on Willow Street had bloomed twice. Hannah counted them every morning: marigolds, violets, a stubborn rose bush that refused to wilt. They were her way of tracking time, of measuring safety. But for me, June meant something else. Another courtroom, another fight, another chance for Richard to drag us back into his world. The defamation case was flimsy, Simone had said that from the start. But flimsy cases could still bleed energy, money, time. And worse, they gave Richard a reason to see my face again. "I can handle it," I told Simone the day before the hearing. "I know you can," she said, "but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone." That morning, I wore a yellow scarf, not to look soft, but to match the marigolds. It reminded me who I was now, Hannah's mother. A woman with sunlight on her porch and drawings on her fridge, and a daughter who no longer hid her stuffed rabbit near the door. The courtroom was the same dull beige as before, the same stale air, but I was different. Richard sat with his new lawyer, less polished than the last one. He looked tired, slightly thinner, but the bitterness hadn't aged, it had calcified. The judge entered, and we began. Richard's lawyer argued that my accusations, though never made publicly, had led to social isolation, lost opportunities, and emotional damage. He claimed his reputation had been irreparably harmed by my insistence on false allegations. Simone stood and calmly laid out our defense. Everything my client reported was in pursuit of protecting her child. None of her actions were malicious, public, or defamatory. All steps were taken through legal and appropriate channels. Furthermore, she added, holding up the folder, "we have testimony, expert evaluations, and photographic evidence that support her concerns." The judge reviewed the papers in silence. Then came my turn on the stand. Again. This time, it was easier. "Mrs. Moore," the judge said, "do you believe the defendant's reputation has been damaged?" "Yes," I said, "because of his own actions." "Do you believe you defamed him?" "No. I told the truth, to the right people, at the right time. I followed the law." She nodded. "Do you stand by your previous testimony?" Without hesitation. Richard's lawyer rose, clearly irritated. "You claim to want privacy and safety, yet you're willing to speak openly about deeply personal matters. Isn't that contradictory?" "It would be," I said, "if I hadn't spent years being silenced. Now that I have a voice, I intend to use it." He scoffed. "You think this courtroom is your stage?" "No," I said, "but it might be my daughter's shield." That quieted him. The judge called for a break. Outside, Simone smiled. "You just nailed it." "Did I?" "You turned his tantrum into testimony." And the court noticed. That afternoon, the ruling was short. "Claim for defamation is dismissed," the judge said. "No damages awarded. No further action pursued. This court advises both parties to focus on moving forward, especially for the well-being of the minor child involved." Richard stood. He looked at me for the first time that day, but I didn't flinch, because I was already thinking about the marigolds waiting back home. That evening, Hannah greeted me with a new drawing. It was a castle this time, not a fairy tale one, a real-looking structure with bricks and flags and a tall wall. There were 2 figures inside, one large, one small. The big one had her hand on the wall. The little one held a paintbrush. "What's this?" I asked. "It's us," she said. "You built the wall. I get to paint it now." I swallowed back the lump in my throat. "I like that. There's room for more people, too, if they're nice." She placed the drawing on the fridge, a new monument, a reminder that while Richard had tried to destroy us with paper accusations, lawsuits, lies, we'd built something stronger from paper, too. Drawings, letters, shields, truth. The house on Willow Street was becoming a home. By late summer, Hannah had learned to ride her bike without training wheels, and I had learned to breathe without checking the window every hour. We planted herbs on the kitchen windowsill, basil, mint, and a stubborn thyme plant that refused to grow straight. Most days, Our life felt ordinary, safe. But trauma doesn't follow calendars. It surfaces when it wants. It was a Tuesday when the doorbell rang. Hannah was coloring at the table. I was folding laundry. I didn't expect anyone. When I opened the door, I froze. Dorothy stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Her hair was thinner, and her shoulders hunched in a way I hadn't noticed before. I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "You mailed a letter calling me poison," I replied. "That was your version of peace?" Her lips tightened. "I was angry. I thought you were trying to destroy my son. I was trying to protect my daughter." A long pause. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I'm not asking you to open it now. Just take it. It's from me, not Richard." I took it with hesitation. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. Dorothy didn't linger. Before she left, she said, "I loved that little girl. I just didn't know how to believe you without giving up my son." And then she walked away. That night, I stared at the envelope. Simone advised caution. Could be a trap. Could be genuine. Open it if you feel ready. It took me 3 days. Inside was a letter. A real one. No threats, no blame. It was messy, handwritten, and disjointed. But parts stood out. "I failed you. I failed Hannah. I saw things I ignored. I heard things I excused. He was never gentle, even as a boy. I used to believe that family was everything, but I didn't realize that protecting a name isn't the same as protecting a child." There was no apology for the court fights, no admission of legal fault. But there was regret, and that mattered. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw it away either. Instead, I placed it in a small box I kept under my bed. A box full of fragments, Hannah's first note, court documents, old keys I didn't need anymore, proof that the past existed, but didn't own us. The next day, Hannah asked if she could invite a friend over. "From school?" I asked. She nodded. "Her name's Lily. She's nice. She has 2 moms. I smiled. That sounds like a good house. When Lily came over, I watched from the kitchen window as the girls played in the yard, running, laughing, their joy uncomplicated. Later, while they had lemonade, Lily pointed at the shield wall. "What's that?" Hannah grinned. "It's our safety wall. Each one's a person who helped me feel safe. Can I make one? Only if you really want to." Lily drew a cat holding a sword. We added it to the wall. That night, while Hannah slept, I stood in the hallway staring at the growing collage. It was crooked, colorful, and beautiful. And I realized something important. Healing wasn't a single destination. It was moments like this, quiet, shared, whole. Then I walked to the kitchen, pulled out a blank paper, and drew one for myself. Not a shield, not a wall, but a window, wide open, facing forward. The first night it rained on Willow Street, I stayed up and listened. Not out of fear, but because I'd forgotten what rain sounded like when it wasn't soaked in dread. It tapped the windows gently, pooled on the porch, made the garden soil breathe. Hannah slept through it, tucked beneath her purple quilt, her arms wrapped around the rabbit she no longer needed for protection but loved anyway. That morning, something changed. It began with a phone call. Simone's voice was steady but urgent. "I just got off a call with Richard's new attorney." My stomach knotted. "He's not filing anything new," she clarified quickly. "He's pulling back." I didn't speak. "He's agreed to supervised visitation only, no more fighting, no more appeals," his attorney said. "He's moving out of state." I leaned against the wall, absorbing the weight of those words. "Why now?" I asked. "I think he knows he's lost. And maybe, for the first time, he realizes he can't win by force anymore." A silence followed, a peaceful kind. Later that day, I got a letter in the mail. From Richard, typed, short, impersonal. "This is not an apology. I just wanted you to know I'm leaving. I won't contact you or Hannah again. I won't contest anything further. Whatever happens next, it's yours to write." No signature, no return address. Just a period at the end of a long, brutal sentence. I showed it to Simone. She filed it. "Legally, it means little," she said. "Emotionally, it might mean everything." That night, I sat on the porch while Hannah watered her plants. The stubborn thyme had finally bloomed. "Look!" she shouted. It's growing, I laughed. Took its time, didn't it? Some things do, she said matter-of-factly, as if she were 70 and not 7. She paused. Mom? Yeah? If he doesn't come back, does that mean it's really over? I considered how to answer that. How to balance truth with tenderness. It means he's not in charge of the story anymore, I said. Who is? You. She looked at the time again, then nodded. Inside, I took down one of the shields on the wall, the first one we'd made together. It was wrinkled and fading, but still strong. I folded it gently, slid it into my journal, not to hide it, but to honor where we'd begun. Weeks passed. The house bloomed. We hosted a neighborhood barbecue. Linda brought lemonade. Lily's moms brought brownies. Hannah ran barefoot across the yard, laughter catching in her throat like wind chimes. Nobody asked about Richard. Nobody whispered about courtrooms. They only asked about the garden, and the drawings on the walls, and the little girl who smiled like she'd built her own sky. I watched from the porch, a glass of iced tea in hand, and knew the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of safety, of beginnings, of voices that had once been silenced, now singing in everyday sounds. The clink of plates, the murmur of neighbors, the shriek of children playing tag, and beneath it all the quiet rhythm of a life rebuilt, one layer at a time. It was Hannah's 8th birthday when I finally exhaled, without realizing I had been holding my breath. The morning started with sunlight streaking through the curtains, the scent of cinnamon rolls baking, and her excited feet padding across the wooden floor like a soft drumbeat. Mom, wake up, it's today. I opened my eyes to her grin, to the gold paper crown she'd made herself from glitter and glue. She wore it crooked, proudly. Yes, my queen, I said, mock-bowing, your kingdom awaits. We didn't throw a big party, just a picnic in the backyard with Lily, Linda, and a few new friends from school. The sky cooperated, cloudless and forgiving. At one point, she stood on the picnic table and raised a paper sword made from a rolled-up poster. I declare this yard a land of no secrets and no bad dreams. Everyone clapped, but I cried. Not the kind of tears I used to know, those hot, breathless, grieving sobs. These were tears of something fuller, something rare, relief, joy, peace. After cake and songs and silly games, the kids scattered through the garden. Linda sat beside me on the porch, nursing her iced tea. You did it, she said softly. We did, I replied. I survived, but she's thriving. She's free. I watched Hannah run, her laughter bouncing between trees, sunlight in her hair. I used to think surviving was enough, I admitted. But it's not. She deserves joy. I do too. Linda squeezed my hand. Then take it. That night, when all the guests had left and the candles were out, Hannah curled up beside me on the couch. Her hair still smelled of lemonade and grass. She pulled something from her pocket. A note, folded, small. Don't worry. It's a good one, she whispered. I opened it slowly. Mom, when no one is looking, just remember, we're okay now. I smiled, held her close, kissed her crown, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't the same woman who once sat in a courtroom begging to be believed. I wasn't the version of myself who had shrunk to fit someone else's idea of love. I was a mother, a warrior, a survivor who had carved peace from fire. I tucked the note into the journal beneath my bed, next to the first one. From fear to freedom. A full circle, but not a return. A beginning. The last note wasn't about danger. It was a declaration. We are okay now. And this time, nobody was going to take that away. This story is a testament to the quiet power of resilience and the fierce courage of motherhood. It teaches us that survival is not the end goal, healing is. Speaking out, even when our voices shake, is the first step toward reclaiming our truth. No matter how long we've lived in fear, we always have the right to rewrite our story. And sometimes, the most profound justice is found not in the courtroom, but in a child's laughter, a safe home, and the peace of finally being believed.